Marcus Green had worked for 10 years to buy his dream home, a quiet house with a big porch tucked at the edge of a suburban neighborhood. But instead of peace, he found himself in a constant war with the HOA patrol. They didn't like him. Maybe it was because he was black, maybe because he didn't bow to their unnecessary rules. Either way, they made it clear they wanted him out. The patrol came at all hours, nitpicking about the color of his shutters, the length of his grass, even the basketball hoop his son had left out one night. But last week, it went too far. He caught one of them climbing over his fence without permission, stomping into his backyard as if they owned it. That night, Marcus sat on the porch, anger burning in his chest. "They think I'm weak," he muttered. But Marcus wasn't the type to back down. He spent the weekend rewiring his front gate with a clever setup. Nothing deadly, just enough electricity to make anyone who touched it jump back in shock. And so, when the HOA patrol returned and tried to climb again, Marcus was ready. Coffee in hand, he leaned back on his porch chair. This time, he would watch. This time, the fence would bite back. Marcus wasn't always the confrontational type. In fact, he was known in his community for being generous and kind. He often mowed his elderly neighbor's lawn without asking for payment. He let neighborhood kids play basketball in his driveway, and when a storm knocked down half a tree, he used his chainsaw to clear the entire street while others stayed inside. But kindness, he realized, didn't matter much to people who saw only what they wanted to see. The HOA patrol, led by a man named Gerald, had a reputation for bullying. They picked on single mothers, elderly residents, and anyone who didn't fit their picture-perfect standards. Marcus, with his bold personality and refusal to be intimidated, became their favorites. Right target. It started with letters, warnings about violations that didn't exist. Then fines, hundreds of dollars for things Marcus never did. And finally, the invasion of his privacy, stepping into his yard, snapping photos, even looking through his windows. Marcus had reported them several times, but nothing ever happened. The HOA board ignored his complaints. His neighbors whispered that Gerald had connections, and it wasn't worth fighting. But Marcus had reached his limit. He didn't want violence. He didn't want revenge. He wanted respect and safety for his family. That's why he came up with a plan. Using his background as an electrician, Marcus installed a harmless but shocking charge across the metal gate of his fence. It wouldn't hurt anyone permanently, but it would send a clear message. "This is my property. Stay out." The night before, Marcus sat on his porch and looked at the stars. His wife worried he was going too far, but he shook his head. They won't listen until they feel what it's like to cross the line. The next afternoon, Marcus didn't have to wait long. The familiar white HOA patrol truck rolled down the street, stopping right in front of his house. Gerald stepped out with his clipboard, flanked by another officer. Marcus stayed still on the porch, pretending to read his newspaper. His heart raced, but his face showed calm. Gerald muttered something to his partner, then marched straight toward the fence. Without hesitation, he grabbed the top bar to pull himself over, just like he had done before. But this time, sparks cracked. Gerald yelped as a jolt surged through his hand. He stumbled back, shaking his arm wildly, his face twisted with shock and anger. "What the?" he shouted. Marcus set down his paper, sipped his coffee, and said, "Private property means private." The second officer hesitated, clearly spooked. He whispered to Gerald, urging him to stop, but Gerald's pride burned hotter than his hand. He glared at Marcus. "This isn't over. You can't do that." Marcus leaned forward. "Oh, but I can, and I will. You don't get to break into my yard anymore." The officer pulled Gerald back to the truck, but not before Marcus noticed something. Neighbors were watching. Curtains shifted, doors cracked open, and people peeked out. For the first time, the community was seeing the HOA for what they really were: bullies caught in the act. The following week, everything exploded. Gerald stormed into the next HOA meeting, his hand still wrapped in a bandage, and demanded Marcus be fined thousands of dollars for assault. But when Marcus showed up, he came prepared. He brought video footage from his security cameras. The HOA patrol climbing over his fence, trespassing without a warrant, ignoring the law. He played the recording in front of everyone. The room fell silent. Neighbors gasped, whispering among themselves. For years they had suffered quietly, too afraid to speak up. But now, with proof in front of them, something shifted. An older woman stood up first. "They came into my yard too," she said, her voice trembling. "I thought I was the only one." Another man followed. "They fined me for having my grill in the driveway, said it was against community standards. But I saw Gerald's son do the same thing the next day." One by one, residents began sharing their stories. The HOA board, usually smug and untouchable, looked pale and cornered. Finally, Marcus stood tall. "All I ever wanted was respect. I've given my time, my energy, and my kindness to this community. But kindness is not weakness. I have the right to protect my home." The room erupted in applause. Gerald's power, once unshakable, was crumbling, and Marcus realized he had done more than defend himself. He had given his neighbors courage to speak out. In the weeks that followed, change swept through the neighborhood. The HOA patrol, once feared, became a joke. The board voted to remove Gerald from his position, citing abuse of power and misconduct. The new leadership promised transparency, fairness, and respect for all residents. For the first time in years, people felt free to decorate their homes without fear, to grill in their driveways, to let their kids play outside. As for Marcus, he became somewhat of a local hero. Neighbors came to thank him, some even dropping by with pies or homemade meals. Children pointed at him with admiration, whispering about the man who shocked the HOA. One evening, Marcus sat back on his porch with his wife and kids. The sun dipped low, painting the sky orange. He looked at his gate, the same gate that had once symbolized division and intrusion. Now, it was a symbol of strength. His wife smiled at him. "You didn't just protect us. You protected everyone." Marcus chuckled softly. "Sometimes, standing up for yourself is the best act of kindness you can give, because it shows others they can stand too." And as laughter and voices floated through the neighborhood, Marcus finally felt what he had dreamed of all along: peace in the place he called home.